Hey, KP, what's going on?
Hey man, welcome back everybody to another episode of Kev Talks. I can't believe this, Higgins. We're approaching 60 episodes, which gets really
Holy
close to
cow.
retirement age. So I don't know what that means. Hint,
I
hint,
know. So what?
audience.
Yeah, we have as many episodes as I have years in my life. Is that what you're saying?
I was getting really daggum close. Yes,
Yeah, it's getting super close. But yeah, I'm stoked, man. It's almost 60 episodes. That's
that's
insane.
insane.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I feel like we just sat down to decide the name of the
Yeah,
podcast and
yeah,
what format we're going to use to record it. And
yeah,
now here we are, approaching 60. And, also what is approaching are some holidays, and
yeah.
let the audience know that we're going to take some time with friends and family, to celebrate and be with them. So we're going to have a couple of encore episodes during the holidays.
Yep.
So look for those. They're some of our favorites. Hopefully they're some of your favorites. But we'll be back with some fresh episodes a couple of times between now and the new year. And then after the new year, we've got an ultra exciting 2026. I just got chills running up
I
down my
know, dude.
spine
Me
on.
too. Got
I'm
some
not
super
going to
cool stuff
tell.
going on.
We're not going to tell anybody yet.
Nope.
But we've got some pretty exciting things. 2026. It's not as exciting. We're not going to be at the Oscars or anything like that, but it's pretty
Well,
dadgum close.
you never know.
Hint,
You,
hint.
you never know. We might be there. But I tell you what, though, you talk about the holidays, and I try to avoid town as much as possible the older that I get. But you go into the stores and you can see all the hard work that everybody in our industry has put in to make sure that the holidays are set in the store. It's coming out and things are happening. So kudos to everybody who continues to push for the holidays. And we're coming up on, we got a lot of Black Friday discussions going on, and I haven't seen any deals that I'm going to get up at 2:30 in the morning and go chase. But congratulations, everybody, for making sure the holidays were set in the store.
I don't know if you and I have ever talked about this. Do you know the only time that I have ever gone to a Black Friday Walmart the day after Thanksgiving, early in the morning? The only time I've ever done it was with you. Do you remember that?
I do. Gosh, that was a long time
That's
ago.
the only time I've ever done it. And I probably
think
will say it's
Circuit
the only
City
time
was
I'm
still
ever going to
open.
do it.
Yeah, I think Circuit City was still open.
I think you're right. Yeah, you just totally dated us like you always do.
Cool.
But yeah, that was an interesting time. Hey, before I forget, I know this is gonna be released after, but a huge shout out to our super fan, Miss Kathy. Happy birthday to her. The day that we're recording this is her birthday. This will be in a couple of days, but happy birthday, Miss Kathy.
Yeah, happy birthday, Mom. Well, a lot of good stuff going on, including our guest that we are about to have, and super stoked about having Adam Basson on. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Adam, and then let's get to what people have been waiting for.
Yeah, really looking forward to this one. I know the listeners are going to enjoy this one a lot. But Adam's the founder and CEO of FlexChain, where he helps e-commerce and omni-channel brands solve tough supply chain problems with data-driven execution and practical strategy. He's built FlexChain around the idea that companies deserve more than fragmented services. They need partners who understand the real world challenges behind growth, nearshoring, inventory, and logistics. Adam's background spans private equity, backed transformation analytics, and end-to-end operations. So we're really glad to have Adam. Welcome, Adam, to Kev Talks.
And welcome, Adam. Oh, hang on a second.
We just need to go live sometime.
We ought to just do it. Hang on.
See
on
who
a
shows
second,
up.
Adam. Yeah. Oh, you know what? We're just going to do it. So let's just rock and roll. Here we go.
Okay.
You kick us off.
All right.
Parkerson.
Welcome to another episode of Kev Talks. All right, Adam, I got to start this session off with something really, really exciting. I'm kind of flipping the script. It's a good day, and I'm really, really talkative for today. So I want to know what you ate for dinner last night.
Let's see what I ate for dinner last night. It was, I was craving a pub sub, so I just got a hot honey chicken pub sub. Never fails.
Nice. So that's kind of your go-to. Good. Okay. I'm trying to get the audience to kind of know who is this guy, and always food. If you talk about food, you can find out a lot about a lot of people.
That's true. I don't know what other than being, being of the Florida, fully of the Florida vibe, right? I don't know what the pub sub will say about me. I eat a lot of other kinds of food too, if it's for what it's worth.
Well, then, yeah, you mentioned it. So you're based in South Florida. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So what's tougher, hurricane prep or logistics planning?
It's they're both a certain kind of logistics, the way it's right.
Yeah.
So in terms of with South Florida, right? Because I'm originally by way of New York, so I grew up and spent my childhood and early adulthood in New York, and lived in a number of other places as well. But I feel like with South Florida, it's just it's just always in the back of your mind, the hurricane question. And I just got a house here in Hollywood, and just sort of, I made sure to think about, okay, well, what's the level of elevation that you're dealing with? How far inland are you? I'm also in the process right now of doing a whole hurricane hardening on the house. So basically replacing the roof, impact windows, doors. These aren't things I would really ever think about in New York, right? I mean, not that we didn't have hurricanes. It's just not necessarily something you need to factor into your planning the same way.
Right. It's a lot more rare up there in the Northeast than it is down in the Southeast, in the Gulf.
Exactly. I would say that, on a normal day, I prefer logistics, but I mean, hurricane prep does give you a good, interesting challenge every so often, right?
Yeah. It's logistics as well, man.
All right. So there's our pivot to logistics. We talked about food and where you're at. Now let's roll up our sleeves and let's talk a little bit about, how you got into logistics. And then in that, let's talk about FlexChain, which, by the way, FlexChain sounds like a rap name. So I got to know how and where that came from.
DJ FlexChain.
I'm thinking of throwing a Z on the end. So it'd be like Flex Chains.
There you go. There you go. I love that.
All right.
But it's, so I'm in kind of an interesting bucket when it comes to people who went into supply chain, just because I know most of the people I interact with in industry, it's always kind of a story of I ended up here. I did something totally different. I was working as an accountant, or I was working as a chemical engineer, or I was working in computer science. And then some type of need or other came up where I became the go-to supply chain person, or logistics person, fell in love with it, and that became the career. For me, so I had some exposure because an uncle of mine was a supply chain executive growing up. So I had some kind of, I guess, front seat exposure to what the industry is as a whole.
Yeah.
And I, basically figured out what I wanted to do when I was about 19 or 20. So early in college, I was picking my major, and I think for me, what it ended up coming down to, I went to University of Michigan, and I knew kind of I had this interest in engineering and the kind of hard math, but I also had, an inclination toward business. And I just kind of asked myself, so I want to make sure I go to a school that gives me kind of options in either domain, and choose a major that lets me lean into both to some extent, that has a strong kind of business application and has also a strong ability to kind of use that, applied math that I like to do. And supply chain really checked all those boxes. It lets me work. I wanted something that let me work as a consultant, or would give me a leg up if I wanted to start a certain kind of business, or if I wanted to, work in a Fortune 500 environment, right? And I think it checks a lot of boxes for me, and it just, I felt like also, and this was something that kind of really more set in early in my career, where, I remember I once, on some business podcast, I remember somebody saying that you always kind of want to, in business, you can make the, greatest impact and the greatest, name for yourself if you run toward the fire that others are running away from. And I think in terms of supply chain, and specifically the path that I ended up choosing thanks to my internship at Danone that I did on my junior year of college, right, where I really leaned into learning kind of supply chain and analytics, right? So working with data, working in Excel, working in SQL, things like that, right? Is supply chain are I feel like a lot of folks can get passionate about marketing because marketing is people. A lot of folks can get passionate about product because product, they just imagine creating things, right? Supply chain, it's abstract and it's a huge kind of amalgamation of difficult little tasks, right? That it's kind of the stuff that oftentimes nobody thinks of wanting to do. It's not like sexy to people, right? And I kind of felt like if I can make that my bread and butter and just what I really thrive in, and figuring out ways to kind of attack it systematically, and leaning into the data side of that, which people are even less inclined to in terms of, combing through databases and figuring out what's the story this is telling us, what went wrong, what do we do about this, right?
Yeah.
How do we present this information? So I kind of felt early on that if I orient myself there, it would just, it would always give me a seat at the table, right? I played bass guitar growing up, right? Largely because
Nice.
what I would say is if you play bass, you'll never have trouble finding a band because there aren't enough bassists, right? And I felt like the same thing when it came here in my career. By becoming kind of the supply chain guy and the data guy, I'd always have a seat at the table.
That's awesome. Kippy, we just talked about this last week, right? So it's just the supply chain is, it's a series of problems, and problem solvers are drawn to that. And I love the way that you put that. It's just like, it is this series of things that have to be executed and problems that have to be solved, and using the data and using the math. And man, I was terrible at math I thought I was terrible at math. I hated it. I was good at it, but I hated it. And man, we just use it all the time.
Yeah. Well, listen, Adam, I think the FlexChain, with what I know, was born, would you say maybe out of frustration with the fragmentation and commoditization of supply chain? Share with our listeners maybe a story of when you realized I need to build something completely different.
Yeah. So, so for me, it was, so I started out my career working largely in kind of systems and software implementations, right? So I started out very much on the pure technical side. I was working at Manhattan Associates, just, implementing WMS and labor management systems, et cetera, to spec. And I knew that that gave me that foundation, understanding how to talk to these types of systems, how database reflects business, et cetera. But then I wanted to take my career in a more operational direction, right? So I first went into procurement, was working in procurement at Newell Brands, and then I ended up going in the private equity portfolio supply chain ops path. And I joined the team at Rugs USA right after their acquisition by Comvest, where I ended up for, almost 6 years, and, left about a year and a half ago to start FlexChain. But I was, I came in as a manager of supply chain analytics and ended up going through a series of kind of operational roles, director of supply chain operations, handling all inbound logistics, and then ultimately as head of planning. So purchasing, supply planning, and inventory management,
Great
and also merchandising. And, what I always kind of found, especially as I got into really the operational side of things, was that even when we would, sometimes it was, okay, we have to just create a custom process or a custom system, right? Because I basically built out a whole data warehouse for Rugs USA, right? And just automated a lot of different processes for the org. Yeah. And sometimes you say it's that we don't want to buy the off-the-shelf system. We could buy the off-the-shelf system, but we want to do something ourselves. Maybe it's a budget question, maybe it's a personnel question, maybe it's just a time. So we just, sometimes the culture of the organization is just build a lot of stuff custom. And sometimes you buy and you shop for the systems, but you kind of realize that, there's systems, unless you're going to, pay a massive budget for a whole team and a whole kind of customization to really make it fit your organization like a glove. Most of the time, the systems out of the box don't necessarily deal with exactly what it is that your business is kind of facing. There's always a degree of customization you need to do. Yep. And that could be technical customization, or it could be process workarounds, process customization, where you're taking something from the system, doing something with it with your team and then re-uploading something to the system or moving it to another system, that there's, rarely is it the case that the system is just, you switch it on and it just takes care of the problem and that's it.
Yeah.
And so I think informed by that, I said, I being kind of technically oriented was always, there were so many challenges, right? Especially, COVID was like, in the e-commerce and retail world I was working in, it was like, it was so many constraints, right? One, there were constraints around serviceability because of parcel carriers having these massive bottlenecks. They just couldn't process packages through certain facilities. There was the question of, we were worried at one point that if New Jersey did a shutdown for all businesses deemed non-essential, would that put a padlock on our warehouse door? And therefore, we need to make sure our inventory is distributed all throughout the network. Just myriad, there was challenges around basically managing and redeploying supply, from overseas. And also container and shipping costs skyrocketed so massively. Like we went from spending, averages of, $3,000 for a shipment from China to the East Coast to suddenly those same containers, you would be happy to get it for $23,000. It was unbelievable. And, I think just in that whole period, right, there was so much like technical, agility and gymnastics that I felt I was having to do just to kind of, as the reality around us kept changing. And how do you quickly, identify where these bottlenecks are going to happen and quickly redeploy inventory throughout your network, quickly, translate your, instead of a bunch of, LCL container shipments, translate them into consolidated loads that can reduce your, import costs for goods, right? And just being able to do these things quickly. And I felt like there are systems out there that will help you plan, and there are service providers that will help you execute logistics. But there is this, I felt, at the time that there was this gap in where does kind of the planning and the dynamics of planning meet logistics and create basically, supply chain agility, right? As opposed to just this sort of fragmented ecosystem of you're either buying a software platform that's expensive and complex to implement and requires a team, or you're just, going to, a 3PL market and saying, here, take care of my supply chain, right? But where are the incentives aligned to bring all of these together if you're not a business that's so big that you can have a whole dedicated internal team for it?
So Adam, so thank you for that. So in the solutions that you provide, I'm really interested to understand a bit more about how you balance what you just said with technology, analytics, and then human, expertise.
Yeah. So, so for us, it really comes down to having, building a company that actually has feet in both camps. So what we say, right, when I'm presenting FlexChain to anybody is I say it's not software as a service, it's software in the service, right? There's, we basically have developed, the idea here and we are a fully functional freight and logistics agency. So we have the ability to move freight on any mode, right? We have the ability, we're part of an extended carrier network, et cetera, right? So the ability to actually coordinate loads quickly, right? But then we develop software that's, essentially analytical software meant to inform certain freight and shipping and logistics decisions, right? So that's kind of the 30 feet out view of where we're, what we're building is how do you kind of think about planning holistically in your organization? And then how do you align your logistics with that in real time? And how do you make, that basically that dynamic, how do you make it turnkey so that customers can kind of, get the benefit of, agile, cost saving, service improving supply chain decisions married to their logistics operations without necessarily having to spend an arm and a leg or completely outsource it.
So
I'm incredibly intrigued.
I know you have
and
hundreds of questions. I could
yeah,
tell.
well, I just like I want to dive in and start doing a demo.
Start diving.
So yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that on a separate occasion. But yeah, I think tell us, like you decide that you're going to do this, right, and you're going to have this software in the service platform. So why, like, what sparked you to just like really do it? And then how did you kind of jump into that?
And tell us about the challenges that you had when you, I mean, if you had any challenges, was it flipping a switch? And Adam, I know it wasn't. So yeah, share with us a little bit of the challenges that you came up with, and that you observed while doing that.
Yeah. I mean, so I think that, the biggest, so what I decided to go after is the first most natural, like there will be solutions that are more analytics focused, solutions that are more logistics focused, right? That are more clearly in one camp or the other. But, going at that kind of intersection first, what I looked at is freight and shipment consolidation, right? So is there a system where, and so looking specifically in e-commerce, we have a version that's as well more for kind of retail, for wholesale type operations. We're dealing more with, palletized, freight. But looking at e-commerce, right, as an example, you have a company that's based in New Jersey, right? And this was just such a common scenario, just sitting on KPI calls week after week after week, which was recognizing. So like, our challenges that we were dealing with were, we make a certain supply plan, right, to make sure we have the right amount of the right product in the right warehouse at the right time. There's always some disruption on the demand side or some disruption on the supply side. So either you have shipments that are going to customers, but you don't have a node there at all, or you might have a warehousing location there, but you just don't have the inventory in the right place because it got, the shipment to your New Jersey warehouse was late. And so, it bled out the inventory from your California warehouse. And then now that shipment arrived in New Jersey, now you only have inventory in New Jersey because California got depleted, right? Like that type of dynamic. How do you actually respond to it? How do you recoup some of those costs? And so for us, we look at parcel consolidation and zone skipping. That's kind of the first challenge. Is a company that ships a lot of packages, a significant portion of those, right? So e-commerce businesses spend 10 to 15% of revenue on their outbound shipping costs, right? So that's, $100 million company could be spending 10 to 15 million a year just on outbound shipping. Significant portion of that, let's say, it could be 30, in a good business, it could be 30%. In a not so well managed business or a business where there's, sometimes businesses that are up to 100 million or 200 million a year in revenue, the warehouse might just be near where the founder grew up, near where the founder lives. It's not necessarily based on where the most customers are. So I've seen situations where a company has a warehouse based in Utah, right? But all of their customers are in the Northeast. And so 80% of their shipments are zone 7, zone 8 shipments. And so for us, right, what we kind of imagined here was, can we create a system that will ingest a company's parcel rates from their current, basically all of their parcel rates from all the different carriers around, from the different basically locations around the country. We would partner with warehouses that are placed all throughout the United States near the metro areas, with the ability to supplement with the client's existing warehouses. For example, if they have a warehouse in the Northeast already, I would just use that warehouse instead of my Northeast partner, right? Then analyze their shipments on a daily basis for opportunities where instead of shipping those packages, 300 packages long distance, zone 7, zone 8, right? They could be loaded onto pallets, right? Moved in bulk, right? Moved as a freight movement 80% of the way, and then either injected to a final mile building, right? So injected at a FedEx warehouse or injected at a regional carrier, right? Or just brought to a transshipment warehouse where they're split up and then picked up with the regular daily load. So it's sort of you're kind of hacking. You're sort of hacking the parcel shipment and issuing. You're trying to basically say for thousands of shipments, and you need to be able to do something like this quickly, right? Because customers are waiting for these orders. right? So basically, we created a system where we can ingest a company's rates, ingest their network map, look at a set of orders, and basically turnkey, create freight loads that go to different parts of the country to basically arbitrage out that whole middle mile, right? And then, since most important piece is that it's a financial tool first and foremost, is we want the ability to tell them up front, because it's a scenario planner, right? So you were shipping these packages out of California. Now you're going to be shipping these packages out of Atlanta, let's say, right? It's the South. We're going to ship them out of Atlanta. So here's the new parcel cost that you would see from shipping these parcels from Atlanta instead. And here's what that middle mile portion will cost you. So we can really tell them up front create a decent estimate of, here is the net profit on this set of shipments that you're experiencing working with us. And then we work on commission. So we don't charge software as a service fee. The idea is we charge a commission on the estimated savings that we're driving, so that customers aren't taking a leap and hoping they see savings. We only really make money if the customer sees, significantly outsized savings versus what we're being, right? So that was what we wanted to create, is where all incentives are aligned under one roof, right? In a flexible system that unlocks these sort of consolidation, cost-saving capabilities for clients, right? In a way that's frictionless for the client, makes it very easy to kind of show them the opportunity.
How has that adoption been when you have that type of pricing model? Are the customers all for that, or do you have some that are like, "Oh, I'd just rather pay you for a platform fee because you're going to make millions of dollars if you save me a bunch of money"?
Yeah, so that's so we're still relatively new. We haven't had we've had customers that have asked about that in terms of, would you be open to it if? We haven't yet gotten to the point where a customer says, whoa, I don't want to be paying. So far, just the fact, because it's more, a lot of customers don't know, or they maybe have heard about zone skipping as a concept. They haven't really seen it or applied it to their business. So they kind of like the more frictionless, we could see how it's working and then figure out where we go from there.
Yeah.
The thing I have seen more common is wanting flat pricing as opposed to contingency. So it's like, I like that I only pay day by day based on my use, but I just want a flat fee for a certain shipment, which, it's funny, right? Because what I always say is we can come up with any pricing model that makes sense. I kind of like the just transparency and visibility of, here's what we're driving in savings and here's the fee. We could come up with something flat, but then technically you might have some shipments where, we're taking a much bigger share of savings, some shipments where it's smaller, right? So it'll all probably come out pretty similar in terms of cost, but some businesses do favor stability and predictability.
Yeah.
So Adam, this is what I'm hearing. I mean, let's be honest. Supply chain has never been sexier than when you're talking about data analytics. And I'm being funny, but data's everywhere. But insights are somewhat rare. So what you described is really how you're helping clients move from what I would call is just the dashboards to helping them make decisions. Is that the business model? Is that really what FlexChain is all about? It's not just dashboards. I mean, there's a lot of those out there, but this is coupling that with insights and decisions.
Exactly. And, we have a very, the goal here for us, because there's an incentives question, right? A company that's just selling you the dashboards and the platform, oftentimes they're a little too disconnected from your operation to actually really want to commit to outcomes, right? A company that's just moving freight, right? Technically speaking, they're incentivized to maximize the amount of freight they're selling you. It's not necessarily there are definitely more consultative freight shops as well. But, from my standpoint, the idea is by creating, by basically having a foot in all camps and saying, we're only focused on driving outcomes. It's like what you're describing. They call it, so there's descriptive or predictive analytics, where they're just describing what happened or predicting what's going to happen. And then there's this third piece, which is prescriptive analytics of what's happened, what do we think is going to happen, what can we do about it? And that's really where we want to sit is being kind of that turnkey prescriptive analytics, taking action. And a company can say, hey, we just want the information. We have a great freight company. We'll handle that ourselves.
Yeah.
Totally fine. Right. For us, we'll sell it as a standalone. Or if you say, but most say, you know what, just we need these done fast. So if you're already integrated operationally with what the system's putting out, just go ahead and move the freight.
Yeah.
Adam,
I love that. So tell me what I need to take action on.
So to work with FlexChain.
No. I mean, like if I'm getting analytics, I want to see what I need to take action on. So I love your approach of the prescriptive side of that, right? Because so many dashboards just give you information and they're not actually actionable insights. So I love the prescriptive, side of that piece.
Exact. And it, and it's interesting, right? Because, you're in terms of some other areas that it ends up like by focusing operationally, it doesn't mean that you can't also get great information that we're not immediately taking action on. For example, right? Like once we're doing this zone skipping, it changes the economics of where and how you need to open warehouses to some extent, right? Because a lot of companies think, well, if I'm stuck sending all these long distance shipments, I have to open a warehouse there. But technically, if you could recoup 20, 30% of that long distance cost, that extends the lifeline of what your, how well this warehouse can serve your network. And then it can also give you some indication of where are we sending a lot of these freight loads? And that tells us where we really want to have a warehouse, right? So it is kind of a network planning tool in the long term as well. So there's information that could come out of it alongside, but it's really focused on action. That's kind of where we want to be playing.
So some of the other hot topics BCOs really care about, one, I want to kind of get your perspective. Nearshoring. Nearshoring's everywhere in the headlines. Maybe not as recent, but where do you see the real opportunities there, and where is it more what I'll call hype than reality?
Yeah, so it's a very, with nearshoring, right? And that's kind of it's a focus, it's an underlying trend, right? FlexChain has a set of tools, right? But we'll also sort of consult and help and advise for companies looking, because this is just such a hot topic, as you said. And the question, as of many things, is it depends, right? Nearshoring, it is an underlying trend, for a variety of reasons, not just post-COVID was throwing gasoline on the fire, but even before that, right? We were starting to see nearshoring tick up even in the last 10 years, right? Largely because one big driver was the U.S. Shale and natural gas boom, which basically gave us lower cost and more stable energy supplies than much of the industrialized world, right? So that was one factor that was driving, more, factory activity starting to take up here. The other piece is in the case of China, right? Like where most of production had been moving over the last, 30, 40 years, China, they reached kind of peak. So in terms of their birth rates have been very low for a long time. And so they've basically, right, in terms of so they have a number of, challenges when it comes to workforce, where one, they don't have that many young people now relative to their population. And those young people now don't want to move across the country to work in a factory, 6.5 days a week, right? So there's more of a, the labor costs in China, like, 30, 40 years ago, it was like, wow, you have a country of 1 billion people and these, just crazy low labor costs relative, now it's sort of the biggest driver, right? Because the labor costs are not the lowest in the world. They're not even, they're higher than Mexico, right? But there is a lot of capital and a lot of know-how invested in China, right? So, that has certainly created a bit of a moat, but nearshoring, especially now with the fraying of relations with China and the challenges we saw around COVID with certain critical industries that we didn't have local supply for, right? That has really stepped up the question of nearshoring, reshoring, friendshoring. I think there is definitely, like, people saying it's going to be an overnight that, right? I think that's high, unless unless tariff wars become permanently entrenched, right, at a really high level. There is going to be some hype. There's industries that are going to be slower to transition. There's going to be industries that don't transition at all. There's going to be industries that maybe they get out of China, but they go to Vietnam. They're not going to Mexico, or they're not going to the United States. And so I think it really depends what industry you're looking at. Um, and what are the circumstances on the ground, both in terms of relations with those countries and just, broadly speaking with that industry. Right now, at this exact moment, with tariff uncertainty, it's actually strangely everybody's curious about sourcing, but not super inclined to make a bet until they have a better sense of exactly where things are going to land. That's just my read on it.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. In fact, I would say every business, as part of their nearshoring should be a part of their resiliency strategy. But most businesses want to be resilient and lean. What's your perspective on can they have both, or is there a trade-off?
So I think there's, so in terms of resiliency and like I think the biggest drive, right? If you want to be resilient and lean, so there's resilient with all of my product coming out of China, right? Where that's that's just a question of building up sufficient inventory to mitigate the possibility of a supply disruption, right? And then there's resilience. Hypothetically, if you're able to say, okay, I have developed a local supply base either in the United States or in Mexico for either to supplement production out of China or to replace it, then you're in a place where you could potentially, by bringing lead time down so much, you could be in a place where you're able to stay lean because you're able to carry much less inventory in your supply chain, and you're also highly resilient because one, you could still maintain a high service level. You could still maintain that 98, 99% service level just with less inventory because of lower lead time and less variable lead time. And there's the other piece, which is if you do go out of stock now, instead of having to wait for, now instead of having to wait for, 35 days for the ocean container to get here from China, right now you're talking about 3 days by truck, right? If you wanted to, bring inventory in from Mexico, right? It's just production time plus, 3 days by truck. The only challenge there is just, you could still have a situation where even if it's being produced in Mexico, Mexico could be importing the raw materials from China, right? So, in terms of that question, it depends on specifically like, that's why really it is industry by industry. The more of your supply chain you can have locally though, the more you are able to get lean and resilient all in one.
Got it. Hey, what size business do you really focus on? Small, medium, large? How do you define that, or is it agnostic by size?
Yeah, so for me, it's a wide range. I'd say our real focus is in that middle. So if you're looking at companies that are 20 to 50 million at the start, and then it can go as high as 5 to 700 million, I'd say is the kind of that's the range we really look at, right? Big enough that you're dealing with, real volume driven advantage, small enough that, that there's, they don't necessarily have the very best national carrier contracts. They don't necessarily have a whole dedicated team dealing with, logistics and analytics, right? I think you want to really, I feel like for us, that's the sweet spot.
Yeah. Spot on.
Yeah, that's perfect.
All right, you mentioned you were in South Florida. Let's pivot now a little bit. I think you're heavily involved in, and I believe you're the president of the CSCMP for South Florida. Talk to us a little bit about that organization, why you are focused on that, and what you're hearing and seeing from what I'll call the next generation of supply chain leaders.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so something, really exciting time in the world of South Florida supply chain networking, because we just relaunched this roundtable. So a bit of context, right? So when I started FlexChain about a year and a half ago, I decided to go and, just as I was building out the software, I said, I'm going to have to spend a lot of time inside, working with developers and coding, et cetera. So might as well go, travel the world while I do it rather than just staying in my, Miami apartment. So I ended up doing kind of a world trip for about 13 months. I was out of the country, just in all different places. And, as long as I had an internet connection, I was able to basically work on that build out. In that time, I was doing a lot of virtual networking. Once I kind of finished my MVP and I wanted to start socializing the system and just getting good networks and the good contacts in the industry, I always thought of myself as a good networker because I liked talking to people, but it's very different when you have to really be intentional with your own business versus just, hey, I'm showing up and hope to have a nice conversation with somebody.
Yep.
So, I started getting very involved with some virtual networking groups. Um, Got, really just, it just totally turbocharged just my relationships and also just the kind of level of confidence I had in my product, just knowing I could always call somebody, who's able to, lend insight to help me make introductions. And then also just the joy I got out of realizing over time how after just a few weeks of doing this very, with intention and deliberation, I was able to help a lot of other people. Right. So I was able to make introductions to people, to other people I met, and really seeing those kind of synergies click. A bunch of folks mentioned, hey, because I knew when I get back to Miami, I'm going to want to have a local in-person networking presence, that I can, kind of help be more involved with, et cetera. And a lot of folks said, oh, you have to join CSCMP, Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals. So I'm reaching out to join. I look online. I see they don't have, or when I see on Google that there's a South Florida roundtable, but when I click it, it says page no longer exists. Mm-hmm. So I reached out to them. I said, hey, I don't know if they're, because they were like, oh, we'll put you in the New York roundtable and some of the others. I said, I don't know if there is one and the link's just not working. If there's not one, I'm happy to create one in South Florida. Because I think South Florida, it's a top 10 metro area in the United States. It's grown rapidly in the last 5 years. There's, whether we're talking about there's a big presence, and growing presence of e-commerce down here. It's huge with the connection to South America, right? So when we're talking about nearshoring, just tons of opportunity right now, as industry and business move from other parts of the United States, as well as if trade patterns shift from, East Asia to South America, South Florida is going to function very, very heavily in that ecosystem. And so I feel like, we deserve to have like a really great hub of, places where professionals can connect, can help one another out, can, get educated on, current inventory industry trends. And, just, overall have, a place where they're able to basically grow a professional network here rather than having to, escape to Atlanta or Chicago or somewhere else to do most of their networking. Yeah. Or even, so that's, that's been our charge, right? So I found a great team of, that serves on the board with me now. We have a number of events that we're going to be, our launch date is planned for October 23rd, right? We're basically, we'll be at CSCMP Edge. We'll be at the Florida Supply Chain Summit. We'll be at Intra Logistics here in Miami Beach. So, really exciting time. A lot of work to build out that local ecosystem. We had some, there basically, it was tried. The last time there was a roundtable here was about 10 years ago. And the biggest challenges were just the transient Florida population and how do you create programming that's fun and engaging so people want to come, but also, if somebody's in another state for a couple months out of the year, how can they still stay involved so you don't lose that touch point? So, a lot of fun, exciting challenges, but, really, really pumped about it.
Well, listen, if there's a CSCMP, I would want to join. I think South Florida, for obvious reasons, would be a very near the top of the list, right, Higgins?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think there's, kudos to you for taking that on because it is something near and dear to Parkerson and I's heart as well, is having that that place for a community of, global logistics people that can actually come together and work together and just, have a community to depend upon.
Adam, you were talking about, I think the metro area and the growth that you've seen there in the last 5 years. How do you see supply chain evolving over the next 5 years, especially with AI and automation and nearshoring that we've talked about before in play?
Yeah, I mean, I think where, with, in the world of supply chain, right? There's a few kind of, I think, areas of what are driving uncertainty, right? So obviously, geopolitical situation is one major driver. Economic, overall economic landscape are we dealing in good, low inflation, low interest rate type environment? Are we dealing in high interest rate, high inflation, right? So there's sort of, I think there's a number of kind of factors that could drive, what the direction of things and where they go. But I think automation now in the world of AI, I think supply chain tends to run a little bit, I think, behind certain other industries. It's a little bit like finance, right? Where banks are still using COBOL and all these like 1970s mainframe languages to run their system
Exactly.
because they just can't afford, there's so much legacy code and they can't
Yeah.
afford for anything to be wrong. And I think, supply chain is a little bit similar in terms of being relatively slow on the technology adoption, just because I think people are, justifiably afraid of, I'm going to plug in some AI and it's going to hallucinate something and it's going to lose me a whole boatload of money. So I think in terms of tech adoption, I think it is going to accelerate, and that we're going to see just more, I think, AI and using, just the AI tools helping with configuring systems, helping with coding up custom modifications, things like that will make it more accessible for some of these countries companies that have been slower adopters of technology, let's say in the 2000s, right, to be brought up to speed. I think omni-channel, right? So just more and more, omni-channel is a seamless experience where you're looking at basically, yes, you're going to have large warehouses, but you're also going to have buy online, pick up in store. You're going to have basically stores as mini fulfillment centers.
Yep.
So companies that do still want to have that brick and mortar presence are going to have to make sure it integrates seamlessly and that inventory flows in both directions. I think certainly from a nearshoring standpoint, I think we're going to see certain industries. So like the ones that I'm watching most closely are going to be anything that has any connection to basically high regulation and national security, right? So defense, healthcare industries, certain energy production, semiconductor production, things that are basically deemed as national security or critical industries that there's a high capital expenditure component, high regulation. I think those industries, we're going to see a lot of reshoring in the United States. I think nearshoring, there's going to be a big push for industries where, so like when it comes to Mexico, right? Areas where Mexico has been kind of as a middle market producer, areas like automotive, machinery, maybe certain types of, home furnishings and the likes that are currently being produced in China. You might see some of that shift over to Mexico, right? Where it's not necessarily like, I think things that are really, really labor intensive and not high skilled necessarily. I think those are going to be, maybe those will go to other countries in South America. They could go to a Colombia, they could go to a Peru. I think I don't think that's necessarily going to go to Mexico. And so I think, Mexico, US, and Canada is going to be the big focus of, I think, the nearshoring boom, right? So that's kind of, I think, looking at those certain industries that we know where there's kind of bipartisan consensus on we need to create supply, creating industrial policy, et cetera. Those are what I'm watching for sure on that front.
Yeah. So along those lines, for our listeners that are students and young professionals looking to or eyeing the field of supply chain, what skills should they be sharpening? What should they be focused on?
So I would say, yeah, I mean, if I'm going into supply chain now, so I think understanding, first of all, just like a general understanding of business, and this is especially if like know why you're doing what you're doing. If it's assuming you're ambitious and you want to move up in an organization, right? Like, yes, functions make you useful to the organization, but I think really understanding why you're doing what you're doing and being able to kind of have thoughtful dialogue around that's the stuff that makes your manager and your manager's job easier, right? Because they know that, there could be, even as somebody who's, run teams, et cetera, we're all moving quickly. And, we're making a lot of decisions every single day. I think if you can, when you can also count on your team to kind of, to be a part of the conversation, to push back when appropriate, to sometimes challenge your thinking, respectfully. I think that's the stuff that really helps organizations grow, and helps, individuals grow in their career. So I think understanding business landscape, understanding, I think nowadays, I think 10 years ago it was less so, but now like having some grasp of kind of, data, knowing how to work with data, whether that's in Excel, whether that's in SQL, whether that's in just understanding enterprise systems and how they work. I think most folks are going to benefit from that in every function. And so having some awareness of that is probably critical if you're a young professional now. Um, and then I think, just in terms of, I always recommend like supply chain methodology, right? So Six Sigma, Lean, integrated business planning, like understand these sort of, how to think systematically about a business, systems thinking, rather than just sort of being the person who, how do I solve the problem of today? Thinking in terms of, if I'm seeing a challenge over and over again, how do I think about fixing the system in such a way that, we don't have to deal with these same challenges tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love what you said. Understand the why. Why are you doing what you do? And what are the impacts of all of that? So I think it's great advice.
Adam, I think you took your own advice. That's how you came up with FlexChain. I mean, honestly, what you were describing could lead these students and young professionals to create the next FlexChain. So watch out.
100%.
They're coming after you, man.
Monster here.
Yeah. Well, listen, this has been really, really good, but I want to, I want to get to the fact that you're both a business leader and what I would call a technology enthusiast. Outside of work, where do you go for inspiration?
I think so for me, there's definitely, I love to travel. I think understanding, because what I always kind of say when it comes to the technology person and the business person, right, is yes, it's definitely a benefit that kind of both are, in one head and body here, but it definitely also creates like, there's a period of transition to get from one to the other. Like when I spend a lot of time coding, I feel like I have to very consciously transition back into like a sales and business growth mindset, as opposed to just being the person who points out the stuff that's wrong. And same way, vice versa, right? When I've been focusing on growing and strategizing and selling for a long time, and then suddenly I have to like jump back in and build a tech module, I could just stare at the page for 2 or 3 weeks before any code actually gets written. So, it's definitely like, the two have to coexist, and it's not always easy. I think just, inspiration is just being able to step away, do fun things, go travel, go see a different country, go learn a new culture. I'm here in South Florida, so I love to go out and, play golf. I love to go out and dance. I picked up salsa dancing when I came down here. So that was
nice.
Nice. Of the moment.
We won't ask you to prove it, but okay. Yeah, that's awesome.
That's for the second interview.
Yeah, exactly.
Extended.
Too.
Bonus material.
Exactly. But it's it is actually, it's really important. And you guys probably find this too, that it's like, you can, whether in business or in tech, dealing in a technical challenge, you could just be looking at the same problem. And it's like, if you've been inside for 12 straight hours, just staring at this thing and it's not occurring, just get out, go do something else, get a good night's sleep, go talk to someone. And then like, you'll be surprised that you wake up the next morning and boom, it just rolls right. It's like, you didn't even think about it for the last 14 hours. And all of a sudden the solution just pops right in, right? So it's important to have a balance, I think, not to be so attached to your work that you never go outside.
100%.
Preach. I love that, Adam. That's great. Well, listen, like I said, this has been really, really good. We always like, Higgins, you're probably thinking of this next question because he's mentioned travel quite a bit. We started the episode off with, hey, what'd you have for dinner last night? So in all your travels, what was your favorite, best, most memorable meal?
Oh my God.
This is time for a plug. You can plug whoever it is, wherever, if you can remember where that was at, let's plug them.
Okay. So this was in, I was in Guadalajara, Mexico for 6 weeks.
Okay.
And so Guadalajara, Mexico, it's a real food capital in Mexico. Like a lot of the meals that we know of, like, barbacoa and chilaquiles, like things you might have heard of here if you go to, a Mexican restaurant in the States, but a lot of it originates there. There was the one, there was, so the thing is, the food was absolutely spectacular, but it was also not the most healthy, because it's, I'd have to really reach to get like some veggies on the side, or
Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot of bread, a lot of cheese, but it was amazing. And so there was something in particular, it was called carne en su jugo, which is basically translates to like meat in its juice.
Mm.
And it was basically like you'd order this thing, it would be, $8 for, it was like a quart sized stew, like I don't even know how to describe it. It's like it's a broth that has like beef and veggies, and it came with these like special kind of like fried chips that you'd have. It was like the most amazing. It was basically like perfectly tender beef with like kind of a nice tangy. I probably had that at least 10 times, and it was just.
Is it like a soup? You mentioned broth. Is it
like
a soup?
Stew? Like
yeah, or stew. Yeah.
It's like, it's kind of a soup, but kind of like you sort of use it as you kind of make yourself little, like you can make yourself little you basically have like your tortilla, and you could basically take some of the stew and kind of create like burrito for yourself.
Oh,
There's
wow.
a lot of ways to have it. Came with, mine came with some rice, and it just like, it was just fantastic.
Wow, I haven't had
sounds
lunch
wonderful.
yet. That's why I've talked about food a
Yeah,
lot.
same here. I'm thinking about a hot dog
know,
from
right?
Copenhagen, Denmark.
Oh,
The thing I will say is everything there came in bags. So like you'd get like a container, like, but it would just be in a bag. And so you'd have to like, and this thing would be piping hot. And so there were a number of times where I thought I was slick in how I opened it up, and I ended up just like totally burning myself. So,
so you mean
proceed
like
with
it to go? Like if they bagged it up and you didn't eat there, you got it to go? Is that what you mean?
I mean, the stew, the soup was in a bag. It was like a
Oh.
plastic bag
Oof.
that they tied closed, and that was where because I guess the
wow.
container, I don't know, to save cost, but it was, that was a challenge to navigate. That was there, and that was also when I was in Asia. It was the same, that it would come in a bag, and you'd have to get pretty creative with how you open it.
Nice. Do you know how many countries you've been to? Do you track that? What's the number you're at?
Total for this trip, I was in Mexico, Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, Romania, Hungary, Poland, Argentina, and Colombia.
Okay, I didn't count all those, but how many countries in total have you been to? Do you
Total?
track?
I don't have it in one dot. I mean, I'm
15
probably
plus.
definitely north of 20.
Okay.
North of 20, I'd say somewhere between 20 and 30, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
So where do you want to go
awesome.
next?
Ooh, next. Let's see. So definitely. So there's new places, right? Because there's I do want to visit some of the places from before, but I definitely Peru, Machu Picchu. That's on my list.
My sister is there right now, literally right now.
Need a report. It sounds awesome.
I know, right? Yes.
She just traveling for a bit, or
Yeah, just traveling.
that's awesome. That's awesome.
Good for
Hope
her, man.
she's hopefully that's inspiration we have for us all, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
100%. Yeah.
Let's see. The other one is Portugal is on my list, and Japan is on my.
Yes, Japan. I've been to Japan, loved it, would go back. Highly recommend it. So go for it.
Yeah.
Well, listen, this has been really good. Tell our listeners, our audience, how to get in touch with you if they'd like to, just network and learn a little bit more about you and FlexChain.
For sure. So you can reach out to me either on LinkedIn, or on if you want to email me directly, it would be adam.basson, Adam .b as in boy, A double S as in Sam, O N as in Nancy, at FlexChain.holdings. So like in the logo up there. So Adam, or sorry, just Adam at FlexChain.holdings. Sorry.
We'll put that in the notes as well.
We would do that again. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Right, so if anybody wants to reach me, they could find me on LinkedIn, Adam Basson, or they could find me, they could email me directly, Adam at FlexChain.holdings, like we see in the logo up there.
Perfect. Well, are you planning to attend any conferences, expos, summits in the near future?
Yep, I'll be at Intralogistics, basically logistics trade show here in Miami Beach. That'll be September 17th and 18th. Speaking on a panel there. I'll be at the Florida Supply Chain Summit from September 29th to October 1st. That's going to be in Jacksonville. I'll briefly present there. And then I'll be at CSCMP Edge as well. That's from October 5th to 8th.
Mhm.
That's my next month. Beyond that, we'll see. Planning for a launch of our CSCMP South Florida with our own dedicated event. That'll be October 23rd. So really excited. Again, anybody in South Florida area, definitely, we want to hear from you. And yeah, I mean, it's conference season, as they say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
for
on
sure.
that topic, when you're deciding which conferences or expos to attend, what's your first filter? Is it content? Is it networking? Or is it something else entirely?
Yeah. So it's, so there's two factors for me. One is basically significance and industry relevance of the event. That's one fact. That's if I'm going to travel to an event, with the exception of CSCMP, just because I'm a part of the organization. Um, if I'm going to travel across the country, it has to be for like the top event with perfect overlap in terms of the kind of audience I'm trying to go meet. Um, and then I'll be more flexible if it's a local event. So anything in Florida or New York, where I could basically either be in the two places where I split time, where it's not too much of a of a lift to get there. Those all, then anything that's kind of supply chain and logistics related, I'll try to be there.
What about TPM in March out in Long Beach? You plan on being there? The Trans-Pacific Maritime Conference?
Yeah, so that one is I have a lot of friends who go there, right? I think in terms of, folks who deal and kind of do a lot of like global logistics out of Asia, that's like a big, that's kind of ends up being a big focus.
Yeah, it's the big one.
In my past life, I definitely would have. With FlexChain, it depends. Could the business go in a direction where that becomes, like, for example, if we were doing a lot of consolidated, ocean freight consolidation out for companies that are shipping from China, I would.
That makes sense.
Current, I'll tap my friends who are there.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah. Well, I think you kind of, one last question. I think you kind of answered this, but do you ever look at a conference more as a place to learn or more as a platform to share your expertise or build your brand? You mentioned you were speaking in your own panels. Talk to us a little bit about that.
So I certainly like to do a mix, right? And it's by coincidence here because I'm representing like a networking org and we're trying to get the word out. And like sometimes the organizers themselves will say, hey, we want people who will speak. If you're interested in collaborating, can you come talk? And I will never say no. I'm perfectly happy to just go and learn and meet interesting people. And just, I mean, I think in the biggest thing, I think in terms of, networking and kind of what I've just learned and kind of growing out my network in the last couple of years has been just being very curious. There is, like, as people kind of, I think, have a challenge with this, which some people only like to network for the purposes of selling their product or the purposes of finding a job, which is all about taking. Nothing wrong with wanting those things. And you should network strategically so that those things that you need can happen. But, as in make sure you're putting yourself in the right places, make sure you're, but have an open mind too, right? Because sometimes the person that you think, if you take this mindset of I'm only here in order to sell, I think everybody can kind of sense that. And I think that you might be surprised, right? I certainly often am, at the person when you read about their profile on LinkedIn and you think, oh my God, that's my perfect client. I need to just network to them and I'll tell them about what they do and I'm going to get a new client from that, right? And that, you'd be surprised that conversation might go nowhere. And then the person where you think, wait, that person does the exact same thing I do. Lo and behold, that conversation leads to all these amazing introductions. Yeah. So I think just keep an open mind and be curious.
Great insight, great advice. All right, Adam. Well, listen, this has been great. Really enjoyed the conversation. Love what you're doing out there in the industry, and look forward to keeping in touch and seeing what happens and what you're able to get accomplished in the future. Really
absolutely, man. Yeah, we appreciate your time. Thanks for spending the afternoon with us.
Thank you both. This is it's a great environment here, great podcast. So professionally done. It's amazing. It's like, it's really an inspiration.
Well,
no, we appreciate that.
Yeah, we appreciate that. And again, thanks for your time, and look forward to visiting with you in the future. So that's it for this edition and this episode of Kev Talks. Look forward to future episodes, and everyone have a great day. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Kev Talks, Real World Global Logistics. If today's discussion inspired you, don't forget to follow, subscribe, rate, and share our podcast.
Remember, every great journey in logistics starts with a single step forward. Let's continue working together to transform the industry.